So we've got, Sacha Stone here on the couch. We're taking a nice fireside chats version of the Travellin Yogi Vodcast today. But Sacha's been very vocal about what he refers to as the pantomime of what's been occurring in the world, what seems to appear to be occurring in the world, and the somewhat illusion around all of it. And we're going to drill into some of that. We're going to unpack a lot of stuff to do with Sacha's background, the content that he has been putting out, and really the underlying message to it all. And in that, we're going to learn a few things about where Sacha comes from, and what really inspires him and motivates him. So there's a number of projects that you've been involved with, specifically have founded. So before we actually get into the nitty gritty of what's been happening and everything, let's sort of go back and understand a bit more about who Sacha is and how you became to be on this path that you're on. For those that haven't actually been paying attention to any of your content or your history. So
well, very simply put, I was wrenched out of my mother's gut, had some moron in a white coat with steel surgical instrument and the filthy isotope frequency that comes off stainless steel, severing the symbiotic flesh, then torn off my mother's tit and thrown into boarding school. The trial of separation, mate. It's the same. We all suffer the same things. That's the alpha point for all of us. We are a species who are foundationally brought into this world using trauma, and most of us die in trauma, and most of our life path is just completely proliferated with either trivia or trauma. The two T's, trivia and trauma. And I think that's what I'm wanting to address in the work that I do, and in the places that I place my attention, put it that way. And your burgeoning days of when you were first coming into, say, looking for truth in life and finding deeper meaning in your own life, and what was there any catalyst that actually caused you to come into that? Well, again, growing up in a war in sub-Saharan Africa was my background, so essentially that piece. Broken family, the usual bullshit. That's just a very 20th century, 21st century story. The older I get, the more I see that this is just a universal theme. The trial of separation. And then coming into a world which is programmed or cult programmed for us and predictably programmed for us. And so most people, 95+%, and I think I'm being generous, percent of people in the world don't ever live their lives. They live a life that is more or less predictably programmed for them, and then they will die on cue from a predictive programmed disease called cancer, invariably, or heart disease. And all of this plight, I think we share with one another, except for the First Nation people. So if you can still get out to Papua New Guinea or the Amazon Basin or the Kalahari, desert, you may just bump into First Nation peoples in their natural primitive habitat, and then you'll find a very, very different metric of life. I mean, they may look up once or twice a day and see the airplanes, flying at 37,000 feet and wonder what the fuck they're looking at. But outside of that, they're getting back with the same old patterns of perfection that they were living in thousands of years ago. So in a sense, it's and of course, white man has sought to depopulate the planet and genocide all of the shamanic peoples out. That's been the objective of the Catholic Church for 500 years, since the doctrines of discovery, or the papal bulls of discovery. And we went ahead and did that purging and did that genocide and that all that blood sports that issued off the Vatican complex. But it hasn't worked. And here we are in the 21st dawn of the dawn of the 21st century, and we are the ones who are caught up in the dream spell, which is crashing about around us now. This thing called Corona, the crowning event of our own idiocy, and the First Nation peoples who are still in Papua or the Amazon Basin or the Kalahari are still going about life in the sweet idyllic way that they ever did. So who were the wisest amongst us, I wonder?
Well, it's very true. Yeah. But, you're speaking of First Nations peoples in Australia. It's funny because they're referred to as the Aborigine. Well, you're not away from, you're origine. And, I spent some time out in Northern Territory. It's very, desert and that, as you said, it's a totally different dynamics, a totally different way of being there, and it's a different time, and it's something we can aspire to. It's like being in the Amazon. It's a totally different time frame. Even just being here in Bali.
Well, there is no time. Those First Nation peoples don't have clocks on the wall. They don't have any idea of 1260 time, which was always the Babylonian dream spell. So I've been arguing for this is my 8th year of screaming about time and the need for humanity to step away from clocks and watches altogether, because it was the idea of 1260 time and the 12-month calendar that is essentially where the luciferic mind, or the false light mind, eclipsed our organic original mind. And that's it's all connected to time, and time is money, and money is fear. So time, money, fear became the source code of this mutant civilizational experiment that we are flapping around in like fish running out of oxygen. But again, we can look back at the patterns of perfection with the First Nation peoples, the Aboriginals all around the world, and we can see the integrity of the true human. The Adamite is still very intact. And now we need to learn from them. I've been saying to as many people who will listen to my wheezing lately that we will have to now move back into a regenesis event where we recognize the lost heritage, the cultural traditions and the mystical traditions that we violated through the Catholic Church and through monotheistic religions, is bulldozing all of those beautiful cultural and mystical traditions. And we need, in a sense, to redeem ourselves now, civilizationally, we need to go back and touch those spaces again, remember those mystical traditions, those cultural traditions, before we can move into any kind of ascension or any kind of real evolution. We have to go back and remedy and, in a sense, retroactively heal those transgressions at the civilizational level.
Yeah, it's a reconnecting to our ancestral ties.
Yes, it is
our very roots, and it's a ancestral healing that we need to take place.
Yeah, I call it the blood song. Absolutely right, and we have to get in touch with that, and we can. And actually, it's the prerogative and the divine gift of every generation of human to be able to absolve and redeem thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years of blood song. Actually, we have a duty of care to do that.
Yeah, it's time enough. It's time enough. Has been already so much of that blood sport already occurring.
Right.
We're seeing the carnage throughout, the different various channels, via our television, via our media, everything. And it's time enough. It's how much more needs to be done, against the progression of our humanity and our consciousness before it's going to get to critical mass.
Yes. Well, you just said it. So the television screens and the computer screens and the telephone screens and the billboards and the Netflix and the Hollywood bullshit and then academia, which is a complete deception. Like 85% of all teaching, education should be banned altogether. There should be a universal boycott on educating children. This is a perversion, again, of the Genesis flame of inquiry, of wisdom, of learning, which should always come from the inside. It should be an invoked thing where the child reveals itself to the parents, to the family. the child is the bloom that is most recently connected to divine consciousness, for Christ's sake. Listen to the child. Don't go and cult program it the minute it's popped out of the womb. So all of this Fabianist Tavistockian witchery that goes on in academia, pure satanic logic, is the very thing that needs to be completely bleached out of existence. And the sooner we do that, we'll get into our psionic, telepathic, universalist intelligence, which is our innate, divine supernature. And once we do that, then overnight there will be no war or disease or poverty or misery or penury, because there cannot be those things. They can't coexist with the divine blueprint, with the divine flame.
You
cannot.
No. I mean, where there is a high vibration, there is nothing that lower that is going to exist there.
Cannot. In that subspace chamber, you can feed the most distorted harmonics into a subspace chamber. If you have a perfect top C note in that subspace chamber, it will disqualify all the entropic frequencies. The discordant, incoherent frequencies cannot survive alongside a perfect tone. That's correct. And but that's again what the hero's journey, so to speak, of the human being is all about: us clarifying the inner lens in our lives, and through right action and pure truth becoming those beautiful top C notes in a perfected frequency, which absolves and redeems all the shit around us, starting with partners and husbands and wives and lovers and family and friends and community. And that's how we do it. It's an inside emotion that comes from the inside, moves out into the lateral plane, and redeems and absolves all this incoherent shite out there. On the other hand, what we find when we look at the world is that it's trying to constantly program us from the outside. It's not an invocationary experience. It's a explicit, extraneous, interventionist, interceding principle that's constantly trying to mind fuck us or cult program us, manipulate us, gain supremacy and dominion over our minds, our bodies, and our souls. That's what we live by today. That's the credo of Boris the Twat Johnson and Joseph the Twat Biden and Daniel the Twat Morrison and all of these imbeciles masquerading as being leaders. They're not leaders at all. They are out of control zombie clerics. They are clerks. They are functionaries of low-scale banking mechanisms masquerading as governments. They are not. They're all about how to penalize the living souls, how to trick us into paying fines and penalties and ending up in prison. Why? Because the prison bond generates more money than the treasury bond for the government. What is the government? It's the mind control technology owned by a clutch of deviant Luciferian families. We know who they are, these Venetian nobility. I mean, I've hung out with a number of them over the years, and God knows I still do bump into them. You know, the younger generations are waking up in those Illuminati families. God love them, and God forgive them. But the old lot, thank Christ, are dying off right now.
Yeah, they're falling off the perch, which is...
not a moment too soon, mate.
Yep, yeah. And you mentioned about 0-point consciousness. Does that tie into that?
It does. It does, and thank you for that, because 0-point consciousness describes the Atman. It describes the Bodhisattva as well to an extent, and we can go into that. But the Atman is the point of regenesis, the renaissance within that we're describing. When I finally, in this mortal realm, at the age of 19 or 27 or 46 or 52 or 78 or 86, doesn't matter, at the point at which I actually reconcile self to self. Which always comes down to, I did it on the October August of 1997. There we go, long time ago. So I remember the day that happened. It was the last time I looked at a calendar. It's actually the last time I looked at a clock or a calendar and acknowledged it. Ask anyone around me. I refused to. Absolutely refused to have any identification personally with TikTok 1260 bullshit, mutancy. But what I did at that point in time was I stepped out of time and I looked in the mirror. I'll never forget where it was. Looked in the mirror, it was a perfect sunny afternoon, and I saw self for the first time. And I put my head up against the mirror, and I just asked for forgiveness from myself. I asked to absolve myself, and that's what I did. I absolved myself fully, and have never, subsequent to that, forgive me, darling, we're filming. I'm sorry, we're right in the middle of it. Just we'll see you next door. Sorry, we'll have to edit this out.
That's
Carry
okay.
on.
That's all right. Yeah. I like the candid stuff that
Yeah.
happens. We had a dog run past in their last one, so yeah. Go.
You got a dog run over.
No, dog ran past. No. That would have been a bit
That
too
was
candid.
great,
that was really funny. Right. Yeah.
Sorry,
so-
my granny muffin just completely threw me. I don't know what, can't know what I was saying.
Yeah.
Because that's the problem with having no idea of time.
Yeah. So it was time, 0 point consciousness, and
Yes.
not acknowledging
okay,
calendar.
so the absolution is the key thing, to absolve oneself through the travesty, the abomination of time, and to let it all go. And that was me forgiving mother and father and brothers and sisters, and forgiving the whole goddamn story, and recognizing at the same time that my story is really quite yawn. Like, really?
Like,
I mean, up until that age, and I can't remember how old I was, late 20s or something, when that happened, when that epiphany occurred to me. But I do remember looking back and thinking, Christ, well, you've spent over a quarter of a century talking shit, telling friends and family, whoever will learn about your story, your yada yada, your little anecdotes. And it's like, no, it's not sexy. It's all speaking to the trial of separation. All of those little stories are just patching up the pain. And at the point of absolution with self, in that perfect reflection, the mirror pool of a perfect geometry of now, you acknowledge your supernature and you say, well, that was then, this is the now, and I'm owning this temporal realm. This is my world. That was the day that both my balls dropped. And then I was able to walk like a man and say, okay, fuck it, I'm going to be cleaving my path in this world, but not through the egoic form, not through the egoic mind, because I understand the false nature of that. I've seen it already in the last, I'm going to be forging forward in this kind of universalist sense. And I went in search of the alphabet of the human heart. That was the language that I concocted at the time to redeem myself and heal myself and move into my path. And that's what I've done subsequent to that perfect moment in time, is I've moved further and further into the embrace of the typhonic consciousness, which was the consciousness that I had in the symbiosis of the womb of my mother. And before I came into this temporal realm, before in utero, when we're connected to that universal state of being. And now I increasingly know that the path I have chosen is, it's not a path, so let's just dispense with that language. It's an idiom, it's a state. And I would say it's a state of grace. And I invite everyone to engage that state of grace within themselves and step away from paths altogether. A path is a doctrine, it's a dogma, it's a destination, and that's never a good thing. But to answer your question, yes, the 0 point is all about the living principle in now, and that living principle being your capacity to align absolutely with Godhead, so to speak, with divine nature, so that there's no incoherence there.
Yeah.
Then you're a capacitor of the divine. Then you can lay claim to being a son or a daughter of God or a child of God. You're not just some, lemming that's being swept by the tide in life and a victim of circumstance, which most of us make the foundational mistake of believing ourselves to be a victim of. Family, bloodline, ancestral, economic margin, income bracket, all of that stuff. But that again is deferral. That's blame. Yeah. That's blaming. And you can never engage that 0 point, a unified consciousness, so long as you have any shred in your mind that is blaming the other for anything ever.
Yeah. It's funny because when I've interviewed people, and some really big themes always seem to come up that I've just been experiencing as well, and some of that's really just hit the nail on the head. The projection, the blaming, and the externalizing.
Easily enough done. For humans, it's easily enough done. We love this idea because the egoic mind tells us that we're fucking great, that I'm wonderful, I'm just fantastic, and I've got a great dick, and I've got great hair, and I've got great stories to tell, and I'm we build these stupid ideas around ourselves, these narratives, stories. We build these stories around ourselves, and then we want to sustain those stories. And then ultimately we become the parasite. In order to sustain them, we've got to sell lies to people so they can look at us, give attention to our lies and embolden our lies. And then ultimately, by the age of the 30s and your 40s, you then start realizing, hang about, how much of the story is really the story, and how much of it is harvesting a false light along the way.
Yeah.
And it takes a real man or a real woman to be able to acknowledge that and say, it's okay, I forgive myself for that. That was because of the wound. That was because of the primal trauma, the trial of separation. I was trying to patch it over. I was surrogating reality. But when you no longer need to surrogate truth or reality, or be even partially in the fiction of your own life, you own the all. You become connected to the alpha, the omega. Some people will view that as being profoundly arrogant, and I don't regard that as at all. I say it's stepping into your being.
Is what it is,
in the now. Yeah, as long as you cause no harm, loss, or injury to other living souls on that journey. Sure.
Yeah, and it's the basic tenets to common law, God's original jurisdiction.
Yes.
Cause no harm, damage, injury, or loss to another person or their property.
Yes, and cause no fraud in your transaction as well, which of course is what governments do. All they do is cause harm, loss, and injury to living souls, and what they do is they consistently defraud the living and the soil, the living men and women of the living soil. So that's why I'm so vehemently outspoken against all systems and methods and modalities of governance, because we don't need to be governed any longer. We never did need that. Actually, in point of fact, that was simply the serpent stealing its way into the Garden of Eden, and how we step by step allowed that hostile takeover of our self determination, our natural innate logic, which is what we should be living by, which is that psionic telepathic interconnectedness of knowing how to act judiciously and kindly and in honor in this world. You don't need a twat in a costume with a baton and a taser and a 38 Smith & Wesson, and a radio mic and a stupid, hat to tell you what is judicious and what is not judicious. Come on. If you're living in the inner city ghettos and you're part of that infestation of the human family, and you're too stupid to see that for what it is and step away from it and carve a life out of the kill grid, which frankly you should do, especially if you're born in the ghetto and you've got a living pulse, you should absolutely know that to get the hell out of Dodge. And everyone needs to now participate in that exodus. That is, the Red Sea parting and leaving the pharaohs of Egypt. This is what we're being invited to do now after this COVID corona theatrical production. Is we're being invited now to cross the Red Sea again to Halvala, to the promised land. The promised land is simply stepping away from an orchestrated kill grid, which is brought to you by your friendly government, paid for by your own time and motion and life force, aka tax dollars.
Yeah, and executed by the hospital pharma-medico industry.
That's the slow death industry. We prefer to call it slow death industry because that's where the business model makes most sense.
That's where the rubber hits the road and the money's made.
They don't want you quite dead. They just want you hanging on, with a bit of dialysis once a week, $300 worth of, pharmaceutical poisons thrown down your gullet every week. Insurance, another $1,000 a month in medical insurance, which now in America, thanks to the gibbering sock puppet Biden, you have to have get penalized if you don't have health insurance. It's no longer even an option. Great stuff. Nice racket.
It all plays in very well into the whole whole grander plan. And speaking of the grander plan, you were mentioning about governance, maybe not about the importance of self-governance, especially, and with the New Earth project, I believe that's at the crux of the project.
It has been
sovereignty, and has been.
It has been the loose, organic, somewhat organic. Process of unfoldment. The New Earth project has been as much of a cock-up as it has been a success. You've walked through here, you've seen the success. Where it flowers, it's beautiful. Elevation of art, beauty, and consciousness speaks to the fabric of human soul. I don't need to sell anyone anything. I don't need to market. I've never paid for 1 square inch of advertising. It's all word of mouth, and if it's not good enough to be sold by word of mouth, then we don't deserve to be in business. But we're not actually a business. This place doesn't turn over any profit. been carrying it for the last few years. But it is a living experiment, and it's a noble and a worthy experiment. And a few creepy crawlies have come along the way and parasited off the project and have fallen off. Thankfully, we've seemed to have shaken all of those parasites and bandits off in the last few months. And I pulled out my broadsword, and anyone seeking to defile this the sanctimony of what we're doing, or the sanctity, forgive me, sanctimony, nice little Freudian slip there, the sanctity of what we're doing now, I'll take their goddamn heads off. I'm just not in any mood right now to continue to allow myself to be desecrated or defiled, much less my friends and family who I live and work amongst. We've been holding this flame for many, many years, and it's now seeding, and I'm seeing that it's a forest of oak trees. It's not just a meadow of dandelions. It's a very powerful thing that we've set into play. But it's been painful, you know. It's really not been as much fun as it ought to have been. It's been really painful. And but I'm now seeing those shoots coming up, and I see that they're acorns, that they're oak trees, and I'm excited. Look at that, isn't that beautiful? And that's the validations from the heavens right there. So we've done that, and I'm so proud of our beautiful tribe.
Yeah.
And I think where it's taking us now that we've also established the International Tribunal in the last 6 years has really found its feet. It's also a lot of ups and downs. A lot of creepy crawlies came in there as well, and tried to defile it because it didn't measure. They didn't measure up to themselves within that ecosystem. That's what you get. But we've got that tribunal moving forward. We've got the World Health Sovereignty Summit running this year into its third year, and we've taken the lead in that planetary conversation. If you look at what we've done in the last 6, 7, 8 months alone, with the Line in the Sand events and the Reclaim Your Lives, the World Health Sovereignty Summit, the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into COVID, Corona, we're up at the tip of the spear, and I'm desperately proud of what we've achieved so far.
So you mentioned the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into Human Trafficking and Child sex abuse. And now that's something that's really become into the spotlight in the last year. Really come into child trafficking, child sex trafficking specifically. There's been a lot of very bizarre things by outward appearances from people that aren't really of the know or in the know in regards to what we're talking about, things like adrenochrome, these very bizarre rituals, essentially satanic rituals that have been mentioned online by a growing amount of people, and specifically with the Judicial Commission. Now, if I may ask, like, what findings, what have been some really standout things that have come to light in the last year specifically? Because
the simply put, the fact that what we were positing in 2018 and the Westminster seatings of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into human trafficking and child sex abuse, all that we were positing at the time has now been proven and come to and borne fruit, in as much as the entire world is talking about it. The mainstream media are talking about it. They can't not talk about it. We now know that Congress and most of the governments of the world and the military-industrial complexes are completely pervaded by pedophiles and by blood ritualists, by Satanists, by Luciferians, by extraterrestrial intervention. Let's call it what it is. This all goes back to Eisenhower and Project Paperclip and Blue Beam and all of those cutesy old Victorian conspiracies that really began round about the Second World War, which I narrowed it down to the day that they, in their idiocy, shredded the fabric of time-space by splitting the atom with the Pacific Atoll testing. And that, of course, was the zenith of the accomplishments of one Albert Einstein, purportedly the cleverest man alive. Bullshit, May God forgive him, and may he forgive himself for the role he played in that, along with Oppenheimer and the rest of these devils who, for whatever perverse reasons, permitted themselves to be demonically possessed sufficiently to build a fucking atom bomb. Really. And the $250 billion military hardware and the missiles and thermonuclear warheads that proliferate the planet now and could send us back to the Stone Age in half a minute. I mean, it's an insanity, but that's what's been built up on the back of humanity subsequent to the Second World War. So let's look at it. 70% of our time and motion and dreams and energy and life force since the 1940s, since the mid-40s, has been, stolen from us effectively by governments and by the multilateral institutions like the Bank of International Settlements or the United Nations and so on. And they've stolen our dreams, our lives, our life force through tax dollars, through penalties. And to do what? To create these arsenals which are in the basements, which are ready to blow our planet up. It's an insanity. It's an insane proposition. Always was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with in the last few months with the Judicial Commission, are you at liberty to say what anything specific that's really come out about?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. I mean, I've done a number of media interviews on this subject, and I dare say there'll be many more to come, because that Commission of Inquiry is not over. It's not finished. We thought it was going to be wrapped by the end of 2018 or early 2019. We thought it would be wrapped. Here we are. We're in just started 2021, and it's not over.
Yeah.
Adrenochrome harvesting. Now the forensic evidences are out there. People are realizing that this is part of a trafficking ring. That's a multilateral one. It's global. It's all around the world. It's connected to the blood harvest of innocence, which is Canaanite ritualism, essentially, older than the hills. It's just never gone away. It just crept into the basement. And whilst we were running around in our idiocy as a species, having babies and taking out mortgages and going on picnics, whilst we were doing that for the last few centuries, we have been set up in such a way that 90+% of our life force, our energy, our attention, our plasma, our kundalini, through psychosexual harvesting, psycho-emotional harvesting, psycho-intellectual harvesting, that's all fractal plasma. That's all stuff that's pumping into the field. That's energy. And it's wrongly directed energy towards football games or towards rock and roll or theater or, I'm not talking about high art. High art, there's always
superficial distractions.
I'm talking about the pornography of trivia versus high art. High art is transcendent. Any good painting or good sculpture or good piece of music or good piece of theater is going to take you into a transcendent state and actually turn you into the inquiry. That's a good thing. But most art is not art at all. It's just it's pastiche, and it's out there just playing with most of the artists and fashion designers today and painters. If you really push them into a corner on it, they would confess they know fuck all about art or about anything. They're just playing with archetypes, playing with colors, and throwing enough shit at the wall to see if it sticks, and then selling it at a very high premium, and playing the game. And the game is all about how much cocaine you can toot, or how sexy you can be and charismatic you can be in that art world. I know, trust me, that's my world. So it's so facile, so fucking shallow. The arts, which is why the arts is this disgusting pillar today that supports the liberal intellectual mind that hates Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, but love Satanists and vipers and Luciferians who are actually raping babies and promulgating the sacrifice of innocence through human trafficking and through gun running and drug running and all the rest of it. So liberal intellectuals / arty types are the worst people to speak to the status quo. They just don't have any idea. And again, many of these people are my friends, hang out with them, but have no respect for their soul bearing because they've become indentured into the Luciferic aspects of art itself.
All right, so this is where we get into the whole Corona pantomime, and you've started a is it the World Health Sovereignty Summit?
Yeah.
Now, there's some big names in there. Del Bigtree.
Del Smalltree, yes.
Del Smalltree, yes, that guy. Was it Robert Kennedy Jr.? We got Professor Dolores Cahill.
All of them. Andy
Buttar,
Wakefield, Rashid Buttar,
Tenpenny.
all of them. Tenpenny,
Yeah.
and Northrop, all pretty much. I'd say we got about 85% of the really big guns in the world.
Certainly.
In the last few months.
Yep.
And I work closely with all of them now, more or less, and on a weekly basis I'm meeting most of those figures as part of a brain trust that we do. So we're evolving that conversation, and it's very consequential.
Yeah. So can we unpack like what is the World Health Sovereignty Summit? What is the ethos behind it? What is the motivation behind it? I think we know what that is already, but what is the intention of it? And
Well, first off, remember that I launched the World Health Sovereignty Summit over a year before COVID. So we were on it.
Nicely timed.
We were on it way in advance, and looking and seeing where things were moving, and seeing how health sovereignty was really the thing that was most targeted and under the gun. Why is that? That's because Cronus, the titan that devours its own young, aka government or the crown, want your babies. They want your infants. They want your blood. They want the psychoactive molecules inside your adrenalized blood, ultimately, if we're going to really break it down. So health sovereignty is the thing that governments have declared war against, and we need to disengage governments. We need to deconstruct all of these artificial institutions. Number one, they're dead things. They don't actually exist in and of themselves. They're fictions bonded on paper. They're spells and bonds on paper. They use us and our life force as the collateral to maintain their own godless fiction. So why are we giving them our attention, much less paying our tax dollars to them? Why? Because we were cult programmed into believing that if we didn't, we'd be beaten with a stick until we died or thrown in prison. Come on, just wake up. At what point do you just pull your head out of your proverbial arse and stop paying your fabric of soul into this myth? It's one perfect moment in time. Actually, it's a perfect moment in timelessness that is required for everyone to step away from the fiction of life and to say, no, I'm not going to participate in this draconian, satanic, luciferic nonsense. I'm going to purpose my life into the affirmation, expansion, art, beauty, and consciousness. I'm here to forge, to cleave, to build, to make, to manifest, to enact, to embody. When do we start to cult program ourselves into that stuff? The affirmative stuff, the meaningful stuff. And we have to step away from the fiction of every aspect of governance. We don't need any of it. We don't need any of it. You need a postal service. That's what you need. You need a good postal service.
That's where it all began.
And the rest should be honest private enterprise. And the best man wins, or the best woman wins. You make a better, a better cookie. People want your cookies. Good, that's the way it should be. Then let Edna next door learn to make a better cookie herself. So this, free market economy and all this, transactioning that we do, all of which is just harvested by the banker class, is how we abnegate and surrender our life force. It's why we die at 70 years and 10, looking miserable, with bodies that are broken, because we are allowing ourselves to be consistently harvested at the life force and the soul level. I choose not to. I choose to step away from that fiction. I choose to begin the process of building a world and manifesting a world that makes sense and that feels righteous. And again, the irony here is that it is the natural born man that I've just described who is the one who moves unmolested but causes no harm, loss, or injury to other living souls. And it is the fiction of our lives. It is the friendly government, the municipality, the courtroom, the bank, the high street, the government, and the multilateral institutions that cause harm, loss, and injury to living souls and conduct fraud in their transactions. So go figure.
Yeah. And the number one takeaway from that is really the importance, and this is the universal theme amongst all of this, is to cultivate, to keep and maintain that connection with the self, connection with Godhead, that connection with that transpires into our own self-identity and who we are outside the 3D constructs of this, this Maya, this thing in which we're existing. Is that, that's the most fundamental thing in all of us. Then we, it's a lot harder for us to become harvested, become manipulated.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
So number one, when you've stepped into what I'm recently calling the Christed light, and I say Christed in the last year, it's a word I'm using because I recognize that the corona, the crowning glory of our idiocy this last year, 2020, into this year, 2021, that has been the great crossing, as in Christos, which is the cross, the crossing. That's why I'm talking about Christed light, because it is those of us who, having moved through this last sun cycle, this last calendar year, are awakening within the dream spell. And so that is by definition the Christed ones. And we're anointed in this new vibral light of awakening. And those who aren't, those who choose to continue to mask themselves and isolate themselves and quarantine themselves and social distance from their fellows, they're choosing death. Simply put, they won't be around much longer. Anyone who willfully does all of the things I've just described will be dead within a short period of time, because this world is no longer embracing people who choose death willfully over life, who choose ignorance over emancipation, who choose to be masked against conscience and against reason. And I describe a huge swathe of humanity in that demographic, because how many hundreds of millions or even billions of souls actually willfully position themselves as functionaries of the status quo, as wage slaves or plantation slaves or bureaucrats or technocrats or any measure of human being who follows a code book or a manual rather than their conscience. And then they use that code book and manual in their enactment, in their vocation, and penalize other living souls by simply doing their job, which is the bureaucrat's favorite fallback position. So that's the problem, is that, and how many people work for government now? This enormous percentage of every population now working for the fiction. That's how government also ensured itself, was to proliferate, tax as many people as much as possible so that they can continue to build up their own false light technology and have never-ending rules and regulations and ordinances and bylaws and codices, and you need people to enforce that shit, don't you? Therefore, the bureaucrats and the technocrats come in, the functionaries. And these are the mindless, moronic class of human being. And I'm not going to be polite about it. I have no respect for people who are choosing to move against their conscience. Now, anyone who's moving against their conscience in the fulfillment of their vocation is damned at some level or another, and needs to recognize that within themselves and step out of it. That's it, the end.
Absolutely. And the problem is that the crux of that is that we say moving against their conscience. The thing is, that conscience has been somewhat warped from a very young age.
Everyone has permitted themselves to have their conscience warped.
Yeah.
So again, it wasn't done to them. They like to
just allow.
They like to think that that's the case.
Yeah.
It's not done to them. They're doing it to themselves, and they're permitting it to be done to themselves. And that's again brings us back to the Atman. That brings us back to the 0 point. So you either awaken within it and lay claim to your life, or you do not. And if you do not lay claim to your life and your life force, you will be the utility of others.
Yeah.
You will be harvested by one demonic force or another.
Yeah. It's interesting because we're seeing a lot of talk about the Aquarian age, and we're shifting after the Grand Conjunction into this age where everything is really just coming up. Undeniably, all of these things that have been coming up in the last 12 months have just really been brought to the surface, darkness to light. Like last year was like the Maha Guru, just bringing all of this darkness to light. And I'm a big big proponent of Kundalini Yoga. I teach Kundalini Yoga. It's one of my passions, and in the philosophy of the Aquarian age, it said that the society will be in thirds. 1/3 will go mad, 1/3 will die, essentially, and another third will thrive. So it's, what do we want to be? Which third do we want to be?
Yeah, very good, very good. I like that. Nice.
So that was from Yogi B, the God Daddy of Kundalini Yoga, brought it. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's what are we going to choose? Which third do we want to be in?
Well, yes, indeed. Again, bring it back to Bodhisattva, which is service to others over service to self, or to Atman, which is being fully aligned with supernature and walking boldly out into life to make of this life what you wish. And that's what we ought to be doing. Again, the Catholic Church sold us a filthy bill of goods by pretending or telling us that cult programming us into believing that we were dirty, fetid little marsupials, and that we didn't have the right to make determinations for ourselves, and that we should all be groveling, begging for forgiveness and for redemption because we're dirty. No, nonsense. What an ugly, ugly thought. How unchristly that thought was. How unlike the Master Yeshua any of the Catholic Church has allowed itself to become over the generations. So no, reject 95% of all the dogmatic doctrine and bullshit that comes out of the monotheistic religions. Absolutely. I speak to bishops, I speak to religious leaders who themselves 100% agree with me, 100% concur with me, that it has become complete cult programming. And we need to now completely bring about a dissolution in the monotheistic religious mind and rekindle the mystical traditions. And go back to the sanctity of our own heart and mind synthesis, which is to say conscience. Follow the dictates of conscience, simply put. Yeah. And that's the path of least resistance to the highest outcome.
Yeah, well, we've seen a lot happen in the last 12 months, and the thing is, where to from here? What can we do as a collective? What can you see us doing?
I think it's dangerous to think in terms of what we do as a collective. Of course, I understand what you mean.
Individually, obviously,
right.
Yes.
So, but I would suggest that the problem is always us trying to surrogate others. Let's not even consider the collective. Let us only consider Atman. Let's only consider me here now. How I can refine, clarify, recalibrate this mind, this heart into pure truth and right action, and weigh and measure every step, every word, every thought, every deed. That's it. That's it. It's just not more complicated than that. And with that, when one begins that process, I wouldn't call it a journey, I'd call it a process in life, then that's when one naturally begins to systemically increase one's capacitance to receive vibral light or divine light or supernature coding, hyperdimensional coding, life force, prana, chi, all of the goodly stuff. And so you find that the more you move into that process of right action, pure truth, weighing and measuring every word, thought, action, and deed, mindfulness, mind, body, and soul. It's all here. It's all in this laboratory here. I don't need the Catholic Church for that. I don't need to go Namya Renge Kyoing. I don't need any mandalas or any dogma or any disciplines or any practice whatsoever. I need to be here now. Absolutely. In the geometry of now. And I need to recognize that the geometry of now is always perfect and always now. That is not to say I cannot imbue it with even more perfection. But I can only do that if I've engaged that transcendence and I've gone into that capacitance. I'm now receiving limitless life force and genius as a result. And I'm able to project my plasma very far in this world now because I'm doing that. That's what we should all be focusing on, that process of becoming divine capacitors. And then through an activated Kundalini and pineal function, we are projecting plasma into the field, into the lateral plane, and we are ensuring that our will is done. And our will is in concordance with natural will, natural law, God's will. Thy will be done is my will be done when I'm in phase coherence. But this notion that thy will be done, that was just surrogacy. That was just genuflection and surrogacy and abnegating your own soul responsibility and your own duty of care as a human being. Generationally, incarnationally, grow the fuck up. Just grow up. Just stop this allegiance to idols. It's idolatry. Master Yeshua would be the first to trash these idols, as would Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He also trashed the Kaaba. People forget that. Muhammad and peace upon him and Yeshua were the same archetype. They both despised idolatry. They were men with 2 testicles who knew how to get up and walk out the front door and challenge the serpent, so to speak, especially when that insidious creature has started slithering its way into your child's life and into the playpens of your kids and into the schoolrooms and starting to terrorize and mind control, cult program our babies into being afraid of seeing human faces for the love of the living Christ. What have we come to? These are the things that are the reckoning, the tribulation and the reckoning that each one of us has got to address and acknowledge the part we're playing in this. If I am playing any role in that, I am damned. If I am the one in the grocery store wearing the mask and poo-pooing others who don't have a mask on, eternal shame upon me. Because I am the one desecrating the fabric of fellowship and of humanity. I am the one taking this planet back to a Martian landscape at the soul level, you know? So again, everything always comes back to you here in the now, me here in the now, and how I am weighing and measuring my own actions in this world. So I will walk out that door, and I will be a godly man and a goodly man, and I will be a kind man, and I will forgive the crimes and the sins and the trespasses against me. And speaking for myself, Christ knows there's a lot of those right now. I'm constantly under attack, constantly being spat at and being desecrated and defiled by thieves and liars and bandits and trolls and just ugly salamanders and dark hearts, and they're everywhere. It's like an infestation. The more you place yourself in that flame, the more you anchor this quanta in this realm, the more you get eaten alive by these godless termites. That's part of the process too. And I don't regard myself as a victim in that either. Yeah, I say that's also bodhisattva, that's also Atman, and every one of us must be prepared for that. That's the walk through the valley of death. The question is, do you fear anything or do you not? No, I fear absolutely nothing at all. Yeah.
So that state of being, the most fundamental thing of being in that state of being that you mentioned is to unhook from the mistruths,
yes,
the lies, the warping, the disingenuousness, and separate from
very
it all.
good, very good. And that's exactly correct, because what you've just described is consciousness in action. And it's all about that. It's not about consciousness. That flower pot over there is conscious. That I can prove that mathematically, that the silica, crystalline silica matrices within that ceramic pot over there contain consciousness, hyperdimensional and otherwise. So no, consciousness in and of itself is not material, is not the thing. Consciousness in action, directed plasma, that matters. And that is the distinction now that I think hundreds of millions of people around the world are awakening to the fact that they have been conscious, but they have not been conscious in action. That they've been the utility of higher elemental forces or darker elemental forces that have steered their conscious mind and their consciousness.
That consciousness in action, that's what I really appreciate again with Kundalini Yoga as well, is because they say Ong, O-N-G. You know, it's the Shakti behind Om.
Yes.
You know, it's penetrating, it's forceful, you know, and it's proactive, and you know, it's not being passive and just absorbing the lies and perpetuating the narratives,
right,
and projecting our shaming onto each other in the process. So if we play any part in I mean, it's very difficult because of having to wear the masks in certain situations.
What
and
did you
things
just
like
say?
that,
But what you just said is so wrong. Having to wear.
Yeah, well,
No, but we have to watch this when it comes to Atman.
That's right.
It will just come down to the geometry of now.
Yeah.
Let's not weigh and measure every word. I don't let, she knows, Debbie knows, I don't let one word go. We do not have to wear the mask.
Yeah.
We
I fully get that. That was a programming slip right there. Yeah. But yeah. So the number one thing is really coming back to, how we come out of this and how we still, remain, connected to Godhead and
remain human.
Yeah, remain human.
Not transhuman.
Yeah, that's it. Or
well, let's talk about
trans
that.
anything else? Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because that is the great existential threat right now. Is this endemic agenda to transhumanize us and to foist into our bodies and triangulate into our bodies through linguistic wave genetics, my favorite science at the moment, which is the transposition of information, genetic information, through lasers, through light, through plasma, into a triangulated point. So what is your friendly government doing right now? Well, the friendly government knows bugger all about this, because governments are made up of technocrats, buffoons, and mandarins. But the Sabbatean invisible hand connected within the hyper-compartmentalized echelon of the invisible mastery inside governments, they are very connected to a transhumanist agenda, which is a eugenics program. This is the issue of the Nazis, which is just 75 years later. This is where they dreamt it would go. And this is indeed where it's going, because the Nazi regime was a huge success, contrary to popular belief. It was a huge success. It was allowed to incubate in the bosom of Nazi Germany, with all of the evils going on, huge wealth being accumulated through the sacrifice of innocence and the sacking of cities and countries all around Europe and the rest of the world, the stealing of the gold. Those monies went into the military intelligence basement of the Nazis. And at the end of the Second World War, the deal struck by Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill was that America was going to get the goods, the science, the bad science, the evil science. And that was the beginning of the deep state, whereas Project Paperclip and the 2,000-odd medical scientists and engineers and technicians, but essentially medical scientists, and who went to America, got safe passage there with their families. They became the head of the snake of the deep state that is now eventuated into the World Health Organization and little Mr. Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates with their colossal eugenics agenda. So that's an extension of that. Mr. Schwab, or whatever his name is, the Davos creature. These creatures are all all an extension of the Nazi empire. And George Soros and Henry Kissinger and the whole godless nest of vipers. But that's the point. It was a tremendous success and brought us to today. And today, the weaponizing of the human genome is essentially what we're dealing with. That's the biggest existential threat. 5G plays a tremendous and will play a tremendous role in that, creating a sky net and a kill grid that through the phased array antenna system and the 20,000 plus satellites are able to essentially blanket the entire surface of the Earth in these frequency sets, which are designed to be able to holonomically go into through steel and concrete into your home, into your bathroom, and see you, into your body, and then actually transpose information into your body, whether it's giving you a heart attack or giving you cancer or just stopping you from going to a protest by giving you a migraine or whatever, or a decimation of the people of sub-Saharan Africa. Or Central South America, Southeast Asia, which is the usual preferred blood sport of the satanic classes in the Anglo-American corporation. But all of that chicanery has been going on. It's now being exposed. The Christed nature of humans that is now activating a morphogenetic field with or without them knowing about it, is the thing that is creating a kind of a Tesla shield in a sense, and activating our collective supernature. That is exposing them incrementally, exponentially, which is why you've got this Punch and Judy show going on in Capitol Hill, right now, where it's all sock puppets playing in a silly little vaudevillian theatre, and
Literally a theatre.
Literally a
soundstage.
Well, a theatre by best accounts under military occupation,
Yeah.
because Washington D.C. is now designated effectively as a foreign invader, which is what it is. And now you've got the CEO of the U.S. corporation masquerading as the president of the Americas, which he's not. Almost certainly that privilege and prerogative remains with Trump and the military brass, who are effectively reconstituting America now, I believe, in a very intelligent way, and showing the world how fallacious and false this corporation government scenario is, and has been, and that it was a criminal coup against the American people. No one should be paying income tax. This debt redemption is coming. The Nasara Gassara is going to be happening. And the Bidens and Harrises and Obamas and Bushes and Clintons and all the rest of them will be exposed for the proxies that they are and the roles that they've played, into this transnational Kabbalistic Sabbatean agenda. And many of them will, I dare say, swing by the neck, or be guillotined, and I don't know what godless
I hear there's
practice.
been quite some renovations and upgrades down in Guantanamo.
For sure there have been. We know that. Lobbing heads off is a very sure way of dispatching people. So is hanging them by the neck. And if you're dealing with subhumans or demonically possessed creatures, maybe it's the righteous thing to do. I don't know. I don't have a position on it. Personally, I wouldn't kill a living soul. That's not my way. But I don't have any moral position on demons being routed out and being beheaded, especially when they've been fucking my babies.
Yeah. So what steps are being put into place now with the judicial committee and with the World Health Sovereignty the World Health Sovereignty Summit being put into place now, and what are you hoping to see transpire ahead from now?
Well, I'm not a spokesperson for the court, so I'm not going to answer that question. There are more activities coming up. The hearings are still open and still underway, and I don't know. I can't answer as to when they will be qualified or closed. But I do know that a lot of activity will kick off in the middle of this year with the International Tribunal. That I do know. And a lot of preparation is being done right now, and some pretty shocking stuff. As far as the World Health Sovereignty Summit is concerned, that will stage again in 2020. Almost certainly it'll be a virtual event, unless we've completely awoken from this dream spell and able to travel again, in which case I will almost certainly position the World Health Sovereignty Summit in North America this year, which I would like. That would be my preference. We did the last one virtually. The one before that was in Asia. I would like the next one to be in North America. Europe, no. Europe is too backward. Europe is too indentured into the satanic machinations of the European Union, the European central banksters, and their jackals. It's a very dangerous place, Europe, right now. Very dangerous. America's a lot less dangerous, believe it or not, because the bifurcation has already happened quite clearly in America. You've got you've got the white hats and the black hats. You've got the masked and the unmasked. We know who the good humans are. We know who the morons are. It's relatively straightforward to navigate that. In Europe, there's a lot of treachery. I mean, connected to the Crown of England, the Vatican complex, the imperial dynasties of Europe, Belgium, the Netherlands, and so on, and France. The French nobility. Don't think they went away. They didn't go away. So it's complex. The psycho, put it this way, the psycho-cultural chemistry in Europe has a fair bit of settling to do before I would want to bring any agenda and stage it there.
Now specifically for Australia, right? We always see as Australians, we always see a lot of talk about other countries, the activities that are going on there, what's below the surface, and so forth. And we've seen a lot of pretty heavy shit go on in Australia, especially I'm speaking specifically in regard to Victoria, the state of Victoria. Some really dark stuff going on. There's some very dubious goings on around the police corporation, force. And the badges that some of these police are wearing, the Chinese communist influence with those flags going up over police officers. So can you unpack anything about Australia and its role in this? We know that the ACT, Australian Capital Territory, just like Vatican, just like City of London, that little autonomous territory. We know it's highly Masonic, all the symbolism through there. So, it seems to be a hotbed of that activity.
I understand loosely the question. Okay. So the piece that the average Australian truther is going to want to get to grips with is the fact that Australia is essentially the utility now of Communist China. But then please understand that Communist China is the utility of Wall Street, the Crown of England, and the Vatican. Okay? So it's not like China is the creature that we should be worried about. It's more Anglo-American banksters, transnational satanic banksters living in gated villas in Tel Aviv and Geneva and London and Rome that we should be more concerned with. They are the Chinese Communist Party. Chinese Communist Party is a bunch of imbecile class of technotronic bureaucrat, scarcely sentient class who just do things by rota, by kind of binary coding. And it's because that's part of the psycho-intellectual proclivity over the last 50 years subsequent to Mao in China has been turning the Chinese into the worst expression of their mantis insectoidal genetic expression. Don't forget, the Asiatic genome is connected to the mantis, to the alien, to the insectoidal aliens, which is why they look more insectoidal than the Europeans or than the Africans or whatever. So that's just part of the cosmogenesis story of the Asians. The fact that China has been, Korea have been so weaponized now by the West, turned into these this creature, so that creature could then build itself up on the back of its slave species, the drone class of the blessed, our blessed brothers and sisters in China. Millions, hundreds of millions of them who've been harvested, their lives, their toil, their labor, their life force, slaves, plantation slaves, disgusting enslavement. To this very day, hundreds of millions of them, and their life force being harvested into the Communist Party, the government, the bank. And that money is owned by whom? Bank of International Settlements, US Treasury, Crown of England, Vatican Bank. We are the ones who are fleecing the Chinese. And now we dare to look at the Chinese and say that they are coming for us. No, no. It's the devils behind us who are the ones who are controlling that theatrical production. We should be begging forgiveness for what we have done to China. And overthrowing this incredible dynastic and imperial traditions of ancient China. The incredible wisdom and intelligence and depth and breadth and span of genius that comes from China. We managed to somehow, through the Cultural Revolution, man, that was a Fabianist agenda, through the Cultural Revolution, we absolutely desecrated these amazing peoples in Asia. Same here in Indonesia. And imposed our little puppet corporation governments and reserve banks, all answerable to the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, US Treasury, Bank of International Settlements, IMF, World Bank, Crown of England, Vatican Bank. Evil is sin. Let's not demonize China. But yes, the Chinese Communist Party, which is the utility of the Anglo-American satanic bankster class, that creature is controlling Australia. And the demons in your parliament in Australia know full well what's going on. But they've all been variously either whitewashed mentally, intellectually, through all measure of trauma or fear or blackmail or coercion or bribery. So that's the problem. And that's why we've got to this point of the citadel about to crash down upon itself. This is the Tower of Babel. We have built this Tower of Babel called government, the corporation governments, that they're now reached the heavens and they're now about to crash and burn. They need to. They must. They've reached the end of the of that cycle of dream spell, which is again why I'm irreverent about the matter, because I don't have any notions whatsoever of respect toward a satanic authority. Why would I? If I'm a rational, sane, loving human being and a son of God, why would I look up to a government? Why would I pay coin to Caesar? Why would I, genuflect and bow and acquiesce to these insane dictates coming out of public health administrators? Where did I sign the contract? My birth certificate? Fuck off. I didn't sign that. There was my foot stuck on it when I was gurgling on my mother's tit. I didn't sign any contract. Get thee behind me, Satan. I will have no part of your dirty business, your dirty commerce, which is trafficking human soul through this galactic plane. I'll have no part of it. That's a choice, right? It's a choice.
Yeah. And I think people always need to remember that we do have a choice.
Always.
We do have a choice. And if we don't speak up, it is that acceptance by acquiescence. When we give away our sovereignty, we give away our rights, our liberties, our freedoms. And that is where we're at.
So stop filling the forms out.
Yeah.
Stop filling the forms. Stop signing bits of paper with your bond, with your signature, allowing it to get securitized and monetized behind your back. You'll never know it. Stop filling out the forms with black capital letters. Stop it. Take a weekend off. Unplug from Netflix and go and learn about quantum syntax. Go and learn about how to sign your name in lower caps and then write it in such a way using banker language that they cannot securitize it. They can't. You have no consequence to the state or the crown beyond a certain point when you're not being harvested as your own straw man, which is the trust, the bond, the birth certificate, the identification logged with the Treasury Department. This is all an insane Luciferic technology that you're not aware of. But no one cares about you. Government doesn't care about you. The public health administrators don't give a fig about you. No one cares about you. No one gives a damn about you. They want you to die slowly, and they want to harvest you for time, motion, life force, coin in the interim. It's as simple as that. Is that a world you want? If it is, then salutations to you, my blessings. Enjoy it. I want no part of that world. So I remove my adherence to Lucifer. I remove my adherence to false light. I remove my devotion to Caesar. I remove my devotion to the Pope in Rome and to the Catholic Church. I remove my devotion to the Crown of England and to the government and to the authority, any authority that imposes itself that I did not invoke, that I did not name. I reject, absolutely. But I will be the one, the natural-born living man of the living soil, to walk unmolested in this world and cause no harm, loss, or injury to another living soul. That is my adherence. That is my pledge. That is my devotion.
Mm-hmm. And that needs to be our greater devotion. All of us, we need to come to that understanding that is the way through this, and to really to detach from all of this programming, all of this coercion, because it's not put in place for us to advance as a species. Thank you for...
Great pleasure. Great pleasure. Nice afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that the message has come through for whoever has been viewing, that we have it all in ourselves to see through, see over and overcome the distractions, the misconceptions, the perceptions that we may have, and what isn't the truth and the light of God, that one true creator. And we need to be able to come back to a place in ourselves to be able to reconnect, to realize that. So, yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
No, yeah. Okay, I end with a tradition at the end of the interview, and that's having a good hug.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
You're a hugger. You're one of them?
Yep.
Okay. That'll work. That'll work. Thank you. That's very kind.
Thank you, Sacha.
Thank you. Great pleasure.